When you're thinking about moving abroad, there are a lot of things to think about. And just like everywhere else, if you're thinking about moving to Italy, there are pros and cons. Hey, what's up? I'm Rafael di Furia, aka Rafi D's me, and I'm back at it again on another beautiful Friday night. And one idea I've had for a while that I would like to do is make a series about pros and cons about living in Italy, and in each video, maybe talk about one or two subjects. And in this video, we're going to talk about actually living here, like on a daily basis, full time. But before we get too much further into the video, if you would like to see more content like this about moving to Italy, Italian citizenship, and more, please click on that subscribe button with the notification bell turned on. And if you could also give this video a like, I'd really appreciate that, as it does help the channel grow. But what is one of the actual biggest pros of being able to live here in Italy? Well, that's just it. That's it. I've said it. Living in Italy. La bella vita, la dolce vita. You get to enjoy that. And yes, there is a lot more to living in Italy than just that. La bella vita is just the beginning. The food, the culture, the pizza, the pasta, and the amore. Oh, and we can't forget the gelato. Whew. But I digress. But there are some other things that you could look at as pros and cons. For example, in Italy in general, in comparison to life in at least North America, life is very often lived at a slower pace and things are a bit more relaxed, and you can take more time to enjoy yourself and live your life. Italy is very much about working to live rather than living to work. But of course I'm generalizing, and it depends on the specific person, but I can say my life in Italy is very different than my life abroad. But there are potentially some cons that can come from this relaxed mentality that some of you who have been going through Jure Sanguinis and Italian citizenship might be a little bit familiar with. For example, sometimes when you're trying to get legal things done or deal with the local municipality, or when you're dealing with the internet companies or electricity, trash, whatever, there might be delays in service which would be normal here in Italy, whereas in another country you might expect service much faster. But this also depends on where you are in the country. The further south you are, the more relaxed things can be. And you might find around July and August that both private and public offices might be closed for a week or two, maybe even 3 at a time. And here vacation time is not only a sacred thing, but in some bigger companies, a mandated thing. And when it comes to working, you'll find that many offices will take a couple hours break in the middle of the afternoon for lunch. For many people outside of Italy, the idea of a few hours for lunch is an amazing idea. But the other thing to consider is that the later that you come back to work, the later that you have to stay in the office. Also, different parts of the country start work at different times. In the south, they generally start later. Some places I've even heard of starting at about 10 in the morning, whereas where I live in the north, you might start around 8, 9. This isn't necessarily a pro or a con, maybe more on the con side, but there's also, with this lifestyle difference, you also have to consider that there will be a payment difference for what kind of work you're doing. As I was working on the idea for this video, I got a message from a subscriber, Joe M. What he was asking me about actually had to do with this week's subject, and other people have asked me about this before. Other people have spoken to me about getting a job offer here in Italy and being offered maybe 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 per year. And this, of course, is euros that we're talking about. And for some people in America, they wouldn't even consider anything around that. And even especially if we're talking about some places like in California and New York, that might not be anywhere near enough for a full year, especially if you have a family. So in Italy, wages generally seem to tend to be a bit lower. This isn't necessarily the place to come and make your millions. It's better if you've already made them and then you come here. But I mean, I'm here, I'm in my 20s and I'm building my own life here. But I came here understanding what I was getting myself into and the risks that I'm taking. Like, for example, I was asked if 30,000 euros would be enough to live on in Rome. And I live in a place where it's supposed to be more expensive than Rome. And I live on significantly less than that, although not by choice. But even with that trade-off, you get access to everything else that's here in Italy just by being here. But this is again something that I knew I was getting myself into. When you move to a new country, one of the biggest cons anywhere you go, it doesn't matter Italy or wherever, there's going to be a transitional period where you're going to be building your life back up. And for some people, things go faster, and for some people, things take longer. Expect for maybe the first few years, you're going to be getting used to things. Regardless of the reasons, whether it's financial or social, there are going to be things that you are going to learn over time. And while I personally have a decent knowledge base about actually coming to Italy and moving to Italy, I know without a doubt there is a lot that I still have to learn. Like I've said before, I want to make these videos so that people can maybe have a little bit of an easier transition than I've had. And I guess you could even call these videos a cheat sheet of sorts. And I think it's important to have a realistic idea of what things are actually like here. And I mean, there is a place for the colorful, fluffy things, the pizza, pasta, and the amore, but it's important to stay real. But then, if you're thinking about city versus country life, one of the pros in the country is that you will get that quieter lifestyle. But the con is that you'll be living maybe an hour or 2 or 3 away from the nearest city. Or there are some cities that do have smaller towns just outside, but then you won't necessarily have all of the nightlife, shopping, cafes, and all of those sorts of things if that's what you're looking for. But if you're wanting to be in that sort of area, then you don't necessarily find that same kind of quiet Italian country living, that old rustic feeling. For that feeling, you need to go a little bit further out. But even if you are living in a city, things are still at a slower pace than they might be, for example, in the United States. If you're comparing the big American and Italian cities, Milan, New York, Los Angeles, Rome, Miami, in Italy, all of the cities are quite a bit smaller, and you don't have these huge, giant skyscrapers everywhere like you might have elsewhere. Granted, there are taller buildings when you are in the cities, but you won't necessarily find buildings that are crazy tall like other places. Like even in the middle of Milan, a hustling and bustling city, you might not find anything over maybe, 8 floors? I mean, that's just a guess, but you're not going to find something that's really tall in the center of town. Maybe if you just go a little bit outside to the newer areas, you might find some taller buildings than just a few floors, but there's still that old school kind of more comfortable feel. I'm not saying that this is the right move for everybody, but I think it's worth thinking about. I've been loving it, other people I know have been loving it, and you may too. As per usual, this is an open conversation, so if you have anything to add or if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. But I've got a question for you. If you're thinking about moving here, what are some of the concerns that you have? What are some of the pros and cons that you're thinking about? Or if you've spent a lot of time in Italy or you're living here, what were some of the things that you were wondering about before you came here that ended up maybe becoming misconceptions and you found things to be very different? What are some of the pros and cons that you've experienced here in Italy? And of course, if you would like to see more content like this, please be sure to subscribe with that notification bell turned on. And if you could also hit that like button, I'd really appreciate it. And if you would like to help make more videos like this possible, please consider becoming a monthly patron over on Patreon. You can go to rafaeldifuria.com/Patreon, or if you would like to sponsor a video, feel free to get in contact through the links below. And as always, I'm Rafael Di Furia, aka Rafi D is me. Thank you for joining me on another beautiful Friday night. Hope you all have a great weekend, and I'll see you all next Friday. Later.